Lesson 3, Personal Goals, Why We Do Mitzvot. Introduction. What is the best way to achieve human perfection? Do you think a human being could come up with his or own plan to be the best and the most upright being? What are the limitations of our own moral judgment?
Very good. So this is what we're going to be discussing in this class. And over there, it was supposed to say his or her own judgment, own plan. So if we wanted to achieve the best life, do you think that we as humans can come up with what's the best way that we should live? Or do we need something that's greater than us to give us the solution? Let's start with big idea number 1. And Sheila, if you'd like to read over here.
A mitzvah are for us, for our own benefit. While it's true that God doesn't need anything, he chooses to desire our deeds.
Very good. So these are, number 1, what is the mitzvahs about? So we start off with point A is that they're for us, they're for our benefit. Point B is that God chooses to desire that we follow his commandments. I will explain, of course, both of these points in greater detail. But just to give a illustration for the first point, imagine a parent is sitting over there trying to feed their baby, and the baby doesn't want to eat the food. So sometimes you'll notice a parent picks up the spoon and says, here's 1 spoon for Tati, for dad. And then the baby eats it, and he's so excited. And then the mom says, and here's another spoon for mom. And here's 1 for your sister, Kayla, and so on. Meanwhile, the baby is taking spoon after spoon. If one were to ask who is really gaining from this food, who is the baby eating for? So the baby might say, yes, I'm eating for my brother and for my father and for my mother, but that's just what he's being told in order to get him to do what's really ultimately good for him. He's really the only one that's getting the nourishment. The father and the mother don't get the nourishment. He's the one that's gaining, but he's too childish to want to do it for himself, so his parents tell him you're doing it for someone else. So too, on a simple level, mitzvot, as much as it's God's commandment to us, it's for our own benefit. It's for us to get the best life possible, just as your parents are telling you what to do, not for their benefit, but for your benefit, to educate you and make you grow up as a functioning human being. So too, God gives his commandment for our own benefit. Let's start with this page, and Elia, if you'd like to read from the beginning until the end of text 1.
In the previous lessons, we established that mitzvot, A, are commands and obligations from God, and B, concern every aspect of our lives, both spiritually and materially. But why does God give us so many commandments? Does God need something from us? Is God lacking something that we somehow fill? For us, let's think about commands for a moment. What are some examples of commands? What is the purpose of a command? Who does it benefit? Text 1. Behold the heavens and see, look at the skies high above you. If you sin, what do you do to him? If your transgressions are many, how do you affect him? If you are righteous, what do you give him? What does he receive from your hand?
Yeah. So if we ask the question, let's think about commandments, ultimately we'll find that many of the commandments, most of them to one degree or another, are here to help us. The question that Job is asking over here in text number 1 is, if one sins or doesn't sin, does it affect God in any way? Meaning, is God a greater God or less of a God if we sin or we don't sin? Are we like his employees and he's running a business, and the more money we generate, the wealthier he becomes, and the lack of our participation makes him poor, makes him not as much of a God because we're not listening? So to be fair, there's actually 2 schools of thought within Judaism. One is from Nachmanides and one is from Maimonides. One is called the Ramban in Hebrew with an N at the end. The other is Rambam with a M at the end. And they both have different views, which are both true to a certain degree, and they complement one another. So we'll start with the first opinion from Nachmanides, the Ramban, and he says, based on the verse that we mentioned and the one we're going to bring momentarily, that it's really for us that God is telling us to do the commandments. Okay, so Sheila, if you'd like to read from Think and then text number 2. Let me zoom in a little more here. So this from this highlighted part and then that English text.
Think about the words of these verses from Job. What question is he asking? And now, Israel, what does God demand of you? Only this, to revere your God, to walk only in his paths, to love him and to serve your God with all your heart and soul, keeping God's commandments and laws, which I enjoin upon you today for your good, for your good.
So the emphasis is added. It doesn't, it's emphasized in the Torah. The Torah doesn't have any bold letters or it doesn't have any italics. But
Right.
Nachmanides quotes this verse and he says, notice how the Torah says, for your good. I'm commanding you to do everything for your benefit. So Job, previously in this text that Eliah read, Job is saying, what we do doesn't matter to God. Why is God commanding us? For our good. He wants us to live the best life that we can live. Let's pull up just the slide over here, which will bring out this point. You have the question, does God need us? Like you have this famous picture that they used in America to say we need you for the war effort. So does God need us? And you could answer, according to the first opinion, that it's like a sister that's wrapping up her younger brother. What is she trying to do to the younger boy? She doesn't need the boy to wrap up because he needs to do it. And it's something that's benefiting her. It's something that's benefiting him. He's going to be warmer. He'll be healthier if he is being wrapped up. So when a parent deals with a child, we're trying to do it for their benefit. That's the way we would define the first answer. Let's read it back in the text. He brings over here his explanation. We'll read it inside how Nachmanides explains it. Text number 3, and Eliah, if you'd like to read, based on, and then the text number 3.
Based on this verse, Nachmanides develops a theory why God gives us mitzvot. The answer to the question, what does your God demand of you, continues with the words, for your good. This means that God does not ask anything of you for his need, rather for your need. As in the verse which states, if you are righteous, what do you give him? Rather, everything is for your good.
Right. So he stresses over here, for your good. According to him, it's all about God is trying to help us. And Sheila, if you'd like to read a continuation from Nachmanides to prove, and the text number 4.
To prove his point, Nachmanides cites the following midrash. What does God care whether one ritually slaughters cattle and eats the meat, or whether one slaughters cattle by stabbing and eats it? Will such things benefit him or harm him? Or what does he care whether one eats carcasses or eats what is kosher? Solomon said about this, if you are wise for yourself. Thus the commandments were given only to purify mortals through them.
So he quotes from the Medrash, which is the commentary that the rabbis have on explaining verses. And they say clearly, what benefit does God have if you eat kosher or not kosher? Rather, it's like Solomon says, if you study at school, you're not helping your parents, you're not helping your teachers, you're helping yourself. You're becoming wiser. So you are wisening yourself, if we can make up that word, by becoming wise. So too, when it comes to following God's commandments, you're helping yourself. So now for the multiple choice question, Eliah, if you'd like to read the options and tell me which one do you think, according to Nachmanides, you could read these 2 questions.
According to Nachmanides, who benefits from our mitzvah performance? A, us, B, God, C, both.
Which one do you
us.
think? Very good. According to him, it's A, correct? And the next question.
According to this midrash, does it benefit God if we slaughter our cows properly? No, it doesn't.
Correct. Very good. So the midrash says it clearly that it was all about purifying the human being who performs them. God is looking to help us. Okay, very good. Let's move on to now the other opinion from Maimonides. And Sheila, if you'd like to read God chooses in text 5.
The question
Here, so
remains.
start from
There?
this,
Oh, I'm
yeah, just
sorry, I
this
didn't
title.
see that. Oh, I'm sorry. Maimonides offers a different understanding. The question remains, what is the goal of serving God? He does not become more perfect if all his creatures serve him and comprehend him as much as possible, nor would he lose anything if nothing existed beside him. It might perhaps be replied that serving God is not intended for God's perfection. It is intended for our own perfection. It is good for us. It makes us perfect. But then the question might be repeated. What is the purpose of our being perfect? Eventually, we are forced to arrive at the following answer. It is the will of God, or his wisdom decreed it. This is the correct answer.
Very good. So I'll just recap this and then we'll read inside to explain it a little more. He says, it cannot be for God because God won't become any better a God, any more powerful or higher ranked God if we fulfill his commandments. And he doesn't become any less of a God if we don't fulfill his commandments. So it's definitely not helping God. Now, what are you going to say? Why do we do commandments for our own perfection? He says, well, what good is it if we're perfect? What is the goal to make us perfect? In other words, we never existed in order for us to need to be perfect. If God's entire intention was to make us good, if we existed independently of God, and then God comes and says, I need to make you good, okay. But we did not exist. There was no reason to create us in the first place in order to need to make us perfect. Don't create us, and we won't need to be perfect, and everybody's happy. Why would God go through all the hassle and all the anxiety and stress and problems that humans could create just to make us perfect if we never existed in the first place? So therefore, Maimonides says we have to say that that was God's desire. To illustrate this idea, there's a technique in interrogation that is helping get to the root of issues by asking why again and again and again. So let's take a random example. Someone makes a statement. If you ask them why, just ask after they finish their statement, you just say why. So I'll use a hypothetical. Someone will say that we should give charity. So you say why? The answer would be, it means a lot to me. Ask again why. Why does it mean a lot to you? So they'll say, well, because it's the right thing to do. Say why? So you say, well, why is it the right thing to do? Because it makes you a good person and I want you to become a better person. So therefore give charity. Ask why again. So they say, well, why should you become a good person? Because then it makes the world a better place. So say, and why? Why should the world become a better place? Ultimately, they'll boil down to just because this is what I want. It's because I want it and that's it. If we keep asking why, well, why do you want to go to the store? Because you want to buy something. Why do you want to buy something? Because you want to wear it. Why do you want to wear it? Because you want to look beautiful. Why do you want to look beautiful? Because you want to have a good time. You want to have a happy life, enjoy your friends. Why do you want to do it? Ultimately, it will boil down to because you just want it. This is just what I want. So too with God, the fact that the world was created is ultimately, according to Maimonides, that was just his desire. He desired to have a world of people that will have the ability to connect to him. So we're doing the commandments not for ourselves, because then why would he even create us? We're doing it for him. So Elia, if you'd like to read, look at the above.
Look at the text above. What does Maimonides question? Why does Maimonides question the answer given by Nachmanides? That mitzvot are given to make us better people. Why should God create an entire reality that never previously existed simply to give us commands that make us better people? These questions really cut to the heart of the creation itself. Questions humans have been pondering since the beginning of time. Questions such as, why did God create us? Why did God make our whole world with all its people and anxieties and struggles and hopes and dreams? What does he gain from it?
Very good. So Maimonides' problem was, what should it matter to God if we become better people? Which is a question on many levels, because number one, we never existed in the first place. Number two, we're so insignificant to God. How would it matter if we become better or not? Do you care if the ants that are crawling in your front yard are better ants or worse ants? You would say they're so insignificant to my life. I don't care what goes on, if they behave or don't behave, as long as they don't bother me. What does it bother? Like, let them mind their own life. Let's pull up just on the screen to get some visuals. There we go. So the question here, Sheila, if you'd like to read the question on the screen.
Why does God want us to become better people?
Right, so this is the question Maimonides have. Okay, yes, I can become better people. We can become a better person, but why? What do we gain by us becoming better? And he boils down to the answer that it's just because God so desired, he had a will to have a connection with human beings that do not see him, do not communicate with him regularly. He's hidden from them, and they choose to follow God. That was God's desire. This is just a little illustration they have of, if we don't say that it's because of God, then we ultimately end up in the same place. Our lives could be a little meaningless by doing the same thing. We're born, we're trying to earn a living, we're trying to live. But if there was no purpose, then what is the reason that I'm working so hard in my lifetime? Well, we'll skip this video for now so we can have enough time. Now the question is, Elia, if you'd like to read this question on the screen, based on the way we explained Maimonides, that he says it's not about us, but rather it's just about him. This is what God desired. This is what he says he wants. Read the question on the screen and give me your insight.
Does this make mitzvot seem more or less meaningful?
Meaning, I'll explain the question. According to Nachmanides, the first opinion, we say the mitzvot are very meaningful because it makes us better people. Just like going to school, eating healthy, dressing well is meaningful. But according to Maimonides, where it's not about us, it's only about him, maybe I can approach the whole mitzvot and say it's all meaningless to me because it's not about me. It's just all about him. This is what he wants. It doesn't make any sense. What do you feel about it? Do you see another way of viewing it?
I feel like I think mitzvot are more meaningful when it's benefiting us, because I think when we do mitzvot, then we're becoming better people. But also God has, I don't know, actually.
Right.
Sorry,
No,
I have a bit of a headache, so I'm a little bit hard to follow.
You said a good point. You said a good point that seemingly the mitzvot would be more meaningful if it's helping us become better. But the truth is, that's what we're going to explain now. To see this point in another light, to see this view that mitzvot are really for God, let's see it in another light. Imagine a father is playing with a child a game. The child's a 2-year-old, and he's playing with him a simple game with pieces on the board. And whenever the child fails at the game, the father gets visibly sad. His face crumbles, and he's notably sobbing. When the child succeeds, if you notice, a father that's playing with their child, the father all of a sudden gets happy, or the parent, doesn't make a difference, father or mother, the parent gets all of a sudden really happy, he's smiling, he's hopping from joy. Now the question is, does the father really care if a little piece of plastic is placed on this square or that square? Does it really make a difference which point of the game it was? The whole game is seemingly meaningless, and the father is just making believe he's playing with this child. But the answer would be yes and no. The act on its own meaning the fact that this piece is in this place doesn't really mean anything to the father. But what makes it meaningful is that his child is the one that put it in that place. He wouldn't be interested if another person put it there, but because it's his child and he wants to have a connection with this child, so he creates this game and where there's challenges and the player has to use his mind in order to figure out what to do. And he makes right moves and wrong moves. The whole setup was there in order to bring out the connection that he can have with his child. So he makes believe, he makes himself, not makes believe, but he makes himself care for the results of the child. Because after all, if the parent was pretending that he cared, but he's only involving himself mechanically, then it would be meaningless for the child. What's really happening is that the father does really care, but not independently, but only because it's his child that's playing the game. So too with God. On the surface, the way we explained that God is commanding us because he wants us to do the commandment seems like it's very meaningless. It's arbitrary. But the truth is, it's really bringing out a greater connection that God has with us. By clearing away any reason of why God wants it and just saying this is what God desires is showing that God chose us simply because he wanted to and not because of what we can do. Meaning it's a greater connection if I say, I just want it because it's you rather than what you can do that makes me desire so. And like we'll explain this momentarily, let's just show up over here a video where the dad is connecting with the boy. It's not about what the boy does, it's just that the boy is his boy. So what's this video bringing out? The dad's excited because his son, he's having a time to communicate, to connect with his son. He's encouraging him to jump and he's visibly impressed with the results because it's his child, not because this is some great feat that the dad can't do on his own, but because this gives him an opportunity to connect with his child. So does the dad really need to do those exercises? Is he really impressed by his son that he can do it? So you could say that he's actually just pretending as if because he loves his son and his son is so important to him, therefore, like a loving parent, God also cares of what we do because he loves us. Let's give another example that would bring out this point a little bit better. What's the common relationship? Sheila, this question is for you. If you could read the bottom and then tell me what your thoughts are.
What is the common relationship that we have with all of these people?
So you have here like a painter, plumber, cleaning lady, barber, doctor.
We probably used, most of us have used these people at one time or another.
Very good. Now,
all of them.
Exactly. And the common denominator is that all these people, we need them for a role that they are playing. You're not looking to connect with your barber, plumber, or electrician, or whatever else you're using. They have something that you need that they can do, but that's it you need. As soon as their task is done, you move on and they move on. You each have other independent aspects in your life. So if God, this is bringing out how God desiring the mitzvot, not because it helps us and not because it helps him, but just that's just what he wants. It actually has a benefit to it because it makes it that God doesn't need us like we're a plumber or a handyman or a doctor, that we're doing a task for him and then we move on, because then we wouldn't have a relationship with him. We would just be doing what he needs. He needs the mission and we are just succeeding to get the final goal, but we're not the final goal. We're just being used in order for him to reach his final goal, that the task gets done. But by explaining the way we said that it's not that God just wants the task done, but this is just God has a desire to connect with us, that we should do it, that makes it so much more meaningful for us, showing that it's not about just God. It's not about that he wants something done, but rather he wants to connect with us. He wants that ability to communicate with us. And like a spouse, you don't love your spouse only because they know how to cook, only because they know how to do handiwork at home, or they can take care of certain aspects in your life. You love your spouse because of who they are. That is really a greater connection. So when God says, I gave you the commandments, not because they're so meaningful, but because it's meaningful that you're doing it, that I could connect with you, it actually, so to explain, Elia, the question I asked to you, it actually brings out a greater potential in us, or a greater desire that God has, that we are the final goal. The final goal is not the commandment. The final goal is us, that we should connect with God. Versus if I say that the mitzvot are all meaningful and we're just the tools that he used, then we're like a plumber. Today, God needs one plumber. If we're not available, he uses another plumber. I don't need you. I just need the task to be done. So in short, these people are not the way we view ourselves with God. We're not workers that God hires. We are the goal, ultimate goal. We are the final result. Like a child, you don't have a child because you need someone that's going to clean up after you make dinner. You have a child because you want to connect with them, not because you need them to do a task. God wants us, and he created the human beings since he desires a connection with humans, not because he needs us to do something for him. Let's read the text inside that really brings out this point. You should be able to see that on the screen. Here. Elia, if you'd like to read this question and then the answer.
Question. If God is perfect, why did he create us? A perfect being isn't missing anything, so why would he need us? If he doesn't need us, is our life meaningless? Are we just some divine experiment? Answer. You are absolutely correct. God, being perfect, was missing nothing before creation. There is no possible need that this world can fulfill for him. He doesn't need anything. So creating us could not have been in order to fulfill a need. It was something God chose to do. He doesn't need us, he wants us. What does God want from us? The only thing he didn't have before creation was a relationship. He was alone. What he wanted from us, or from this world, was a relationship with free beings. So he created us and gave us ways of connecting with him, the Mitzvo. But we can't say that he needed this relationship with us. He may have been alone before creation, but he was still God, perfect and missing nothing. He didn't need a relationship, he wanted it. Does this make our life unnecessary? Does the fact that God doesn't need us make us less significant? No, on the contrary. When we have a relationship with something just because we need them, such as a plumber or a family doctor, then when that need has been fulfilled, the relationship ends. Your connection is dependent on them providing a service, and will only last as long as that service is needed. But when we have a relationship with someone simply because we want to, because we have chosen to connect with them, then the bond is intrinsic. We don't love them because of what they do for us. We love them for who they are, and that is forever. God doesn't need us, he wants us. He didn't give us commandments because he needs them to be fulfilled, but because he wants to relate to him. If we were created because God needed us to do something, then we wouldn't be secondary to that mission. Once the mission was fulfilled, we would be disposed of it, or we would be secondary to that mission. But God needs nothing. He chose to bring us into being as pure. He chose to bring us into being as a pure act of love. That is the test of true love. If my beloved could no longer provide me with my needs, would I still love him or her just for being my beloved? By creating us, God answered yes.
Very good. So to sum it up, God doesn't need us, he wants us. He chose us, and he said it's greater than a need, because need means I don't really need you, I need what you can do. God chose us, which means he said, it's just you who I want. And yes, there's ways that we connect with God, but it's really about us, not about the commandments. So all what we just explained the last few minutes was going deeper into the second opinion. First opinion was it's for us. Second opinion was it's for God, but not that God doesn't need us and he just wants us to do something, but rather God wants us more than anything. Meaning it's not about that he needs us to do the commandments. He wants us, he chose to have a connection with us. So that is the second view, which they go a little bit hand in hand, that it helps us and it also allows us to have a connection to God just on its own, that God so desired. A little story, Sheila, if you'd like to read, that brings out this point.
Igor, you know, Ivan, I have been thinking it is really very stupid for us to pay taxes to the Tsar. Ivan, why is that, Igor? Igor, because do you know where all our rubles come from? Well, I'll tell you from where. The Tsar himself has them minted in his palace. That's where. So what, Ivan? So what, Igor? So what? So why doesn't he just keep all of the rubles he needs in the first place, and we'll keep ours? Ivan, Igor, you are so stupid. That's the whole point. The Tsar doesn't want his rubles. He wants your rubles. Right.
So this story brings out that point in a simple Russian group of people sitting together. It's not that God wants the commandments. He wants us to do the commandments. He wants the connection with us. That is what he desired. Yes, he could have kept the commandments himself, but he wants us to do it like the Tsar wants the citizens to pay their taxes so they can feel a relationship. Okay, so let's do, Eli, I would like to read from here till the end of the page.
God asking us a favor. What's more, by choosing to value us and care about what we do, God is making himself vulnerable, so to speak, further enhancing the degree of our relationship. Wait, I feel like I didn't read that in a way that made sense. Summary. We have covered big idea number one. God is not missing anything, nor does he need anything. Rather, A, mitzvot are for us, for our own benefit. B, while it's true that God doesn't need anything, he chooses to desire our deeds. In the following, am I supposed to answer?
No. This is explaining the two answers. It's not a question. Yeah. The first answer was that mitzvot are for us. The second one, that it's for God, but not in a sense that God doesn't need us, but rather God chooses to desire our deeds. Okay, let's just pull up on the screen. I just want to explain a little bit of God asking us for a favor, that it makes him vulnerable, which makes the relationship even greater. Let's just pull up over here on the screen on the slide. So number one, just going back a few slides, mom and me, is the relationship needs-based? It's unlike this relationship where it's needs-based. Mom and me in a healthy relationship, the truest and deepest relationship is when one chooses to care about another, not because of what they can provide, but because of they themselves. So precisely because he doesn't really need us, and yet God chooses to have a relationship with us, that just demonstrates how valuable we are for us. If God needs us, then I could say he doesn't really want us, it's just what he needs from us. But if he doesn't need us and yet he chooses us, shows how deep the relationship is. So like, think of it as an example. If the president calls you up and he wants to take you out for lunch, that would make you feel extremely valuable. He doesn't need anything that you can provide that he doesn't have, but rather he wants to have that relationship with you. So as we see in this slide, God doesn't need us, he wants us. That would be the definition of the second answer. Need shows that I'm lacking something I need. Without you, I cannot get. I want something means I can manage without it, but I chose to want you to have that relationship. This is explaining what you mentioned earlier about God asking us makes him vulnerable. Let's read this one. Elia, if you'd like to read from Kevin Farzad. This is just a little bit of a quote he posts.
Me trying to ask someone for a favor. Hey, could you help me with this thing? Absolutely no pressure though. Totally okay if you can't. If you'd rather run me over with a car, that's cool. Are you mad at me? Why is it so hard to ask someone for a favor?
Right. What do you think? Why is he having a hard time to ask someone for a favor?
I feel like maybe he feels bad and he doesn't want to take up their time.
Right. And also he's feeling vulnerable that he's not good enough and therefore he needs to ask someone else for something. But it actually enhances the relationship when one allows themselves to be vulnerable with someone else. Allowing someone to do a favor for you actually helps the relationship grow. So too with God, he chooses to make himself vulnerable and tell us to do the commandments in order to build that connection. Okay, let's go on to point number 2 in the class. And Sheila, if you'd like to read section 2.
How are mitzvah good? Big idea. How are mitzvah? Mitzvah benefit us in 2 general ways. Materially, they help us lead a fulfilling life. Spiritually, they connect us to God.
Very good. So these are how are mitzvot good? Because it helps us physically and spiritually. So let's start with point number 1. Elia, if you'd like to read Nachmanides until the end of text 7.
Nachmanides previously argued that mitzvot are lecha.
No, letov lach, which means for your good.
Okay, good for us. What is that good? In what way are mitzvot good for us? Mitzvot are good for us practically. One aspect of letov lach is a practical level, on a practical level. Just as the commands of a parent help the child live a moral and productive life, following the mitzvot allows us to live as individuals, families, and communities in line with divine values, bringing a level of perfection to our lives and the world. Maimonides articulates the practical good of mitzvot at the end of the Hilochot Chanukah. If a person has the opportunity to fulfill only one of 2 mitzvot, lighting a lamp for one's home, example Shabbat candles, or lighting a Hanukkah lamp, the lamp for one's home receives a priority since it generates peace within the home. Peace is great for the entire Torah, or the entire Torah was given to bring about peace within the world. As Proverbs 3:17 states, its ways are pleasant ways and all its paths are peace.
Very good. Yeah, so Maimonides brings out the point over here that what do mitzvot accomplish? What is their main goal? To make us practically have a better life, to have a peaceful life. So what is the benefit of the mitzvot? Before we discussed why we do it, what is the benefit? Number 1, you'll have a more happy life, a more peaceful life. Okay, and Sheila, if you'd like to read according to the bottom of the page.
Where's you shall?
From here, where it's highlighted, according.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. According to Maimonides, what is the most important element of mitzvah? A quick look at one of the 10 commandments immediately reveals the practical benefits of mitzvah. Shall I read 8?
Yeah.
Okay. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor this man's servant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. It is self-evident how such a mitzvah is for our own good. Wallowing in negative emotion, such as jealousy, can be detrimental to our mental health and can ruin existing relationships.
Okay, so here we have an example of a commandment where we see it's for our own benefit to live physically a happier, better life. And Elia, point number over here, the truth, and text number 9.
The truth is that even a mitzvah that appears more ritualistic has tremendous benefit for the community. Take this mitzvah that applies to a Jewish king. When the king sits on the throne of his monarchy, he must write a Sefer Torah for himself. The Torah must never leave his side, rather than when he goes to the lavatory or the bath. When he goes to war, it is with him. When he returns, it is with him. When he sits in judgment, it is with him. When he eats, it is next to him.
So this is a law. Now the question, the law sounds a little excessive, that someone has to have a Torah scroll walking around with him wherever he goes. So if we just read the commandment without any explanation, it sounds like meaningless. Why does a king, imagine the president, besides walking around with his football for nuclear weapons, imagine he has to walk around with someone holding a Bible next to him the whole time. We would think it's a little foolish. However, let's see what the commentaries explain. Sheila, if you'd like to read text 10, why do we have this commandment?
The reason for the mitzvah, the king is under his own power. No man will pain him over his actions nor rebuke him. He is free to wave a wand and kill whomever he wishes with a simple command anytime he wishes. As such, it is critical to impose extreme safeguards and reminders that will check his base urges, bending his will to his creator. This is why when the king goes out to war, adjudicates trials, or sits down to eat, he is accompanied by a Sefer Torah. In short, it should never move from his eyes unless he needs to use the facilities or the bathhouse.
So he explains that's precisely because the king is so powerful and can do as he pleases, he needs to be extra careful to make sure he doesn't follow after his heart's desire and doesn't start becoming a dictator. Imagine if in today's society, we would be careful that every politician would be following and having constant reminders of following God's commandments, how much better our society would look. Here they give a short clip. Let's see a few politicians misbehaving or behaving inappropriately. How much better would society be if they actually
in 2020 to run for president?
So, if the only people that run for office are the people that want to run for office, what does that say about the psychology of our government?
I would do away with the education, commerce.
That society has. Not you. Forget about anything else. Not you.
These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work.
I ask for a limited vote on the committee. Say aye. Speaker.
According to a controversial study from the late 90s, politicians score higher than other professionals on something called the NPI, or Narcissistic Personality Inventory. And the data appeared to show a spike in characteristics like superiority, arrogance, and entitlement. There was also research conducted in a courtroom setting that revealed that people who appear more confident.
So what do we see from that video? That sometimes they could use extra dosage of humility, holding themselves accountable would help society a lot. So this is, again, an explanation how we see commandments are for our own benefit, personally and society as a whole. And Elia, if you'd like to read over here, Mitzvot, and then text 11.
Mitzvot help us grow as individuals. Beyond the societal benefits of mitzvot, mitzvot also help us grow as individuals. All of these mitzvot are to subdue a person's evil inclination and improve his or her character. Indeed, most of the Torah's laws are nothing other than counsels given from the distance, from he who is of great counsel to improve one's character and make one's conduct upright.
Very good. So on a simple level, the Maimonides says that it's all about making us better people. Okay, and Sheila, if you'd like to read according and text 12.
Okay. According to this source, what is the purpose of mitzvah? Here is another form of this idea. God wanted his chosen nation to be adorned with the choicest of qualities, with blessed souls and generosity of spirit. I have already written of the idea that behavior impacts character, invoking God's blessing. Undoubtedly, when a person leaves part of his fruit in the field for the needs of the poor, it implants a certain satisfaction and appropriateness in his or her soul.
So again, he quotes a commandment of leaving food in the field for the poor as a way of making us better people. And here we have another example of the famous commandment of the Passover Seder. Elia, if you'd like to read, take until the bottom of the page.
Take the mitzvah of the Passover Seder as an example. Designed by the Torah as a reminder of the Exodus from Egypt. How does this mitzvah make us better people? It's a great time for family and a nice story to talk about. But how does it make us overall better people? Nachmanides offers an explanation. The reason for the mitzvah, when a person appreciates the plain miracles he or she will eventually appreciate the more hidden ones, which is indeed the foundation of the entire Torah.
Very good. So here we have another example.
Oh.
Oh.
I think it keeps going, but that might be something else.
Oh, correct. Yeah, you can read in summary. Yeah.
In summary, one general way that mitzvot are. Wait, is that the same? Oh no, never mind. Sorry. In summary, one general way that mitzvot are litov lach is that on a practical level, they guide us as individuals and a community towards the most meaningful life.
Very good. So on a simple level, it's about making us better people, and like celebrating Passover allows us to focus on the miracles, the good things that happen to us, instead of sitting and complaining. If you designate an entire day every year, an entire holiday, a week, to thank God for miracles, you'll notice more and more miracles throughout your life. Now, point number 2 is that mitzvot are also good. Commandments are also good spiritually. And Sheila, if you'd like to read over here, and then text 14.
Oh, okay. The word mitzvah is related to the word I don't know the word, meaning connection. A person who performs a mitzvah forges a connection with the essence of God, the one who gives that command. This then is the meaning of the teaching of the sages, that the reward of the mitzvah is a mitzvah. The reward for a mitzvah is the connection it makes with God's essence.
Very good. So the second explanation is that it's good for us spiritually, meaning our souls have needs just like our bodies do. Our bodies need to eat and need to be fed, well rested. They need to be stimulated. So too our souls need to be fed the spiritual aspects, which allow it to connect with God. So it feeds our soul, it connects us with God, and that is ultimately the reward for fulfilling God's commandment, as the Mishnah says, is the commandment itself. Meaning, when one did the commandment, he already got his reward, that he was connected to God. It's like, what's the reward for eating? The reward for eating is that you ate, and therefore you're full. The reward for fulfilling the commandment is that you connected with God. You already did something that brings you aligned with God. Okay, and Elia, if you'd like to read, there is, and then the summary of point number 2.
There's no difference at all as to what the command is about. Sorry, my sister texted me. Sorry. There's no difference at all as to what the command is about, whether a great lofty matter is a simple trivial one or a simple trivial one. Every single mitzvah connects us with God. Summary: we have covered big idea number 2. Mitzvah benefit us in 2 general ways. 1, materially, they help us lead a fulfilling life, and 2, spiritually, they connect us to God. In the following section, we will proceed to explore big idea number 3.
Okay, so we just explained point number 2. Let's just see over here on the screen a few of those slides that bring out this point.
In 2020.
So how does remembering Exodus make us better people? We said it helps us focus on the miracles that God does, or like this little joke, I guess. Why are you drinking so much wine? And he says, nope, it's just Passover. So mitzvot are good for us also spiritually because it connects us with God. Just like you have food to eat for your body, there's food for your soul. Your soul also needs nourishment. This video as well, we'll skip that for now. So are all the mitzvot equal? This is the last point you read. And the answer is, to some degree, yes, because it's connecting us to God spiritually. There's no difference as to what the commandment is about. Whether it sounds great and lofty or whether it sounds trivial, every mitzvah is about another opportunity to connect with God. Here's a short clip that brings out a question this fellow had. It's a nice...
So, with that ultimatum, I just said, if God's so great, why does he insist on all these tiny details? Why can't we skip? And that's all. That's the only question I had. And just because he told me I had to write something. And it always did bother me that if God was so great, why was he stuck with all these tiny details? And it seemed to upset him if we missed one. And if you used a meat spoon and cottage cheese, you have to go bury it and pull your hair on it. I could never get that. It really was beyond me. So that's basically what I was asking the Rebbe, is what all the angst was about. So he began by asking each one of us our names, and I told him my name was Avram David. Then he asked our mother's name too, Ben Malka, and my ex said Yocheved Chana Baspina, and my father said Moshe Ben Chana. And the Rebbe just stopped and began tapping with his pencil. And I just looked, and the Rebbe addressed my father and says, "Your son-in-law has two names, and your daughter has two names." My father thought, and I said, "Oh, my mother's name is Hannah Hendel." The Rebbe just nodded and wrote that down too. And then he turned to me and he said, I don't understand your question." So I thought it was pretty forthright. So I started to say it in Yiddish, thinking maybe he had difficulty with English. And he stopped me, put his hand up, and he said, "It's not for God, it's for us." And I could see, God wants us close to him, and this is the path he gives us. It's like he gave a path, and he said, "If you follow this path, you'll find me." And it's not that if you don't follow this path, I'm going to blind you, I'll hurt you. Just the opposite. I want you to come close. And here I'm giving you a path, a means in which you can find this proximity, this closeness with me. It was a very radical thought to me. I had never ever seen Judaism in that light. It was always focused on what was forbidden and the consequences of doing what's forbidden. It was in yeshiva, I was away, everything was taught with the slap, with the hit, and you're no good, and Osvorf. And so I had more than my field of Judaism. And but this really intrigued me. And I was very taken. I felt as though I was in a dark room and someone had opened up a light.
Okay, let me just show here two more slides.
So, with that ultimatum.
So the question we mentioned about fulfilling God's commandment, sometimes we ask, well, maybe I don't understand it yet. I want to understand first, how is it that commandments connect me to God, and then I'll do it. So just as when it comes to swimming, one doesn't learn by outside the pool, but you get into the pool, you get wet, and then you learn how to swim. So too, by fulfilling God's commandments, starting to connect with him, that actually helps us actually feel the connection. And think of it like, over here, we'll show an example of a basketball game. Look how crazy people get after the game. And
Watford for the win! Yes! Yes! Oh! Unbelievable! Unbelievable! Unbelievable!
Now, so if someone never went to a game, they would say, I don't get why these people are running crazy because a ball went into a little round metal thing. Why are you going all crazy? I could do it any day. What's so special about it? But someone that went to a game and is into sports will say, well, you don't understand because you're not part of it. You didn't do the basketball game. You weren't there. You didn't experience it, and therefore you don't feel it. So too with mitzvot, when one doesn't understand the meaning, by doing it, by actually just being there, getting it done, helps the person start appreciating it even more. An example to bring this out as well is like soldiers in the battlefield. They don't sit there in a class that teaches them all the techniques of battle. They actually do exercises and training where they're doing the actual tasks that they'll need to do during war. So too, when it comes to commandments, it's not just enough that one studies about it, but one has to actually perform the mitzvah and do the commandments, which allows him to get the experience. So when he's in the real world, when he's in the real battle, he didn't just learn about it, he knows what to do. He actually knows the tasks, knows the job, how to get it done. Let's read point number 3 of the class. Okay. Point number 3, Elia, if you'd like to read.
Absolute divine morality. All mitzvot, even the ones we can understand, should be fulfilled simply because God commanded us to. Because A, human beings can always rationalize away even the most compelling reasons, and B, all of God's decisions are really beyond human comprehension.
Very good. So this is the point we're going to focus on in this class. Let's start with point number 1. Sheila, if you'd like to read.
God is the ultimate source of morality. Understanding Now that we know that the benefits, both material and spiritual, of mitzvah, let's discuss the following question. Is it why we should be doing them? We may think, based on our newfound understanding of just how beneficial it is to do a mitzvah, that these reasons should be the driving force beyond our religious commitment. In the lines below, we will argue that this is emphatically not the case. Can I read that?
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah,
For
read
as
this.
long as anyone could remember, there was a clock mounted high on the tallest building in the town. As people would go about their business throughout the day, they would periodically glance upwards and then automatically check their own watches. Sometimes there would be an inconsistency, and then they would reset their watches to the correct time. But times changed. A murmur of discontent was heard in an element of the population. The clock is so high, it's a pain in the neck, quite literally, to always have to look up at it. Why can't the clock be lowered down at eye level, more accessible? What if the clock is wrong? It's practically impossible to change it. Now, if it were installed on a lower building, it would be much easier to fix. The locals were vocal and the vocals were local. A town meeting was called, a decision was made, the clock was lowered. Then a funny thing started happening. When people noticed a discrepancy between the town clock and their watches, more often than not, they would now adjust the time on the town clock. After all, I know that I have the right time. Then someone else would come by and adjust the clock. Within a short period of time, the clock had been fiddled with so often that it broke down. The consensus was that it was no longer relevant, not worth fixing, and the clock was consigned to the trash heap.
So what does this story tell us? This story tells us that if one tries, instead of having a higher value that he looks up to and changes himself, rather he looks to change what society accepts, it eventually will keep changing until it breaks. In order for a society to live a good life, it needs something greater than itself to tell it what is right or wrong in order to make sure that it doesn't fall into a trap where it eventually keeps changing what's right and wrong. So chukim, let's explain what that is. You could divide the commandments in general to two categories. One category would be commandments that you understand, like don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Even Shabbat is a commandment we can understand, because God says, I created the world for 6 days, rested on the seventh. But then there are commandments that are beyond reason. For example, not to mix milk and meat, or not to wear wool and linen in the same garment, or the laws of purity and impurity. Many of these commandments don't make any sense to us. So it's specifically the latter commandments, the chukim, the ones that don't make sense, that really bring out our connection to God. Let's see this text inside. Elia, if you'd like to read text number 14.
Oh yeah, wait, sorry. Mine says 14b.
Oh.
I think it's the same one.
Yeah, correct. You're right.
The phrase, and you shall keep my statutes, chukim, is a reference to matters that Satan and the nations of the world challenge because the reasons are not known. Examples of chukim are the prohibitions against eating pork and the prohibitions against wearing clothes made from wool and linen. Lest you say these have no reasons and are meaningless acts. And the verse states, I am God. To indicate I am God, I decreed these statutes, and you have no right to doubt them.
Very good. So it's
Statutes.
God. Statutes as in laws. So God says, I created these laws, and therefore you follow them. It's not only if it makes sense that you follow them. So read this multiple choice question, or read this. Tell me which one do you think is a chok?
What is an example of a chok? Singular. 1, honor your father and mother. 2, pay your workers on time. C, do not mix milk and meat. I think C, because
Very good. See, the first two make sense. The third one doesn't make sense. But it's not like if it doesn't make sense, we say, God, it doesn't make sense to us, so we won't fulfill it. On the contrary, the ones that don't make sense, that makes sense. Meaning, it makes sense that we won't understand why God wants certain things. The ones that do make sense are shocking to us as how is it that me, a human being, can understand God's mind as to why something should be done. In addition, there's also a fear of leaving it up to human rationale that could lead us to very dangerous places. And Sheila, if you'd like to read Can't Leave and text 15.
Can't leave it up to human rationale. The next source takes this idea one step further. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, all mitzvahs, even mispatim, must be fulfilled, not only because we appreciate their reasoning, but rather because they were given at Sinai with an acceptance of and surrender to God's will.
So he says, not just should we fulfill the commandments that we don't understand because God commanded, but even the ones we do understand. For example, the commandments of don't kill, don't steal, even those we should fulfill because God said so. That's the ultimate, that all commandments are fulfilled because God said so. And Eliyahu, if you'd like to read text 16.
In the following text, Rabbi Soloveitchik argues the precise point. Apparently, reason is not a reliable guide even with respect to mishpatim. There are borderline situations which confuse the minds and consequently, it finds itself helpless in applying its moral norms. Since our intellect must weigh pros and cons and is slow and deliberate in deciding, society starts to nibble away at the edges of marginal, borderline problems. Life must be lived. Before our logic can formulate an opinion, society will have already weakened all restraints. Permissiveness will be replaced orderliness, and the immoral in man will have emerged triumphant. For example, the mind certainly condemns murder. This is particularly true of the killing of a young working mother who leaves behind orphan children, but does this abhorrence of murder also apply when the victim is an old, cruel, miserly woman who is in the eyes of society was a parasitic wretch? As in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, sorry, I'm having such a hard time reading this.
No worries, euthanasia.
Yeah, isn't that be practiced to relieve the elderly or terminally ill from further suffering?
Right, so his point is that if we just use our mind, where will we end up? Not every time can our mind tell us exactly what's right or wrong. I'll use an easy example for all of us to relate to, and that is Germany. Germany were considered very intellectual people. They had the best universities, the brightest minds, and yet they somehow rationalized murder. They somehow said that it's actually helping society, and it was all legal. In their mind, this was the right thing to do. There's actually studies, maybe you've heard of something called the story of the wave. There was a teacher in Palo Alto, California, a high school teacher, that proved to his class that within a short amount of time, he can get them to join his group and start doing things that they were against just a few weeks ago. But once the whole group starts behaving a certain way, they became like Nazis within a short amount of time. There was also a German guy that did this. It comes to show that when we just use rationale, we just use our minds, we're very quickly influenced by decisions that need to be made quicker, and we rely on other people joining, saying, well, must be it's the right thing because everyone's doing it. Look how Germany went from being very intelligent to being extremely cruel because it was only the rationale, only using their mind for it. Or here we have, I'll just pull up quickly this cute video showing how when you go with rationale, you never get anywhere. Sometimes a mother just has to tell their son, listen, you got to just do it because you got to do it. It's not all about making sense. All right, let's actually do this slide before. Eliyahu, if you'd like to read this question.
Does God command because it is good? or is it good because God commanded? Oh, am I supposed to answer this?
Yeah, give me your thought. What do you think?
I think good. Wow, this is really tricky. I think it is good because God commanded it, because some of the things that he commands, like the chukim, like we don't know why. Is it specifically going to make a difference in the world or something? But he has some sort of reason, or because he says that we should do something, then we need to trust that it's
Great,
right.
great. Yeah, you got it right, 100%. It's not that there was a world and then God came and gave us laws in order to live in the world properly. God made the world in order that we should be able to fulfill his commandments. So the commandments is what makes it good. Because God commanded it, therefore it's good. Because if one goes by saying God commanded because it's good, then sometimes if my mind tells me something's good and God didn't command it, I might follow my mind. Yes, we should use our mind, but understand that our mind is very limited and we can end up in dark places if we just follow our mind. Look at this next screen. We have colonialism. When one country overtakes another country and completely dominates their economy, the Holocaust, Jim Crow, apartheid, these were all legal in societies where they didn't think of themselves as fools. No one thought of themselves as crazy idiots. They thought of themselves as very intelligent, smart, upstanding citizens, but that's what happens, and it's normal for it to happen when one just uses their mind. So this is the scary part of not having the chukim aspect, not having the God just commanded it. Let's see what happens here when one just tries to rationalize everything.
But I have to yell at you guys. Listen. Okay, what? Like everything that you do at this house, you can't trust everything at Grandma's house. Okay. Okay, then what? Then you're not listening to me. Then you're not listening to me. I asked you not to do something. No, but listen to me. Look at, if we do something, if you get that out, that birthday off, you're gonna break it. Okay, but I'm letting you know but that you cannot. No, you're not listening to me. Listen to me now. Listen to me now.
Right. So if a mother is trying to convince her child to go to school because it's for her or his benefit, the child will say, well, if it's for me, then I'm telling you, I don't want to go to school. So the mother tries to explain with long-term benefits, but the immature child's mind is just not able to comprehend it. Eventually, the mother will just say, listen, you're going to school. There's no choice about it. If you like it or not, get going. That's the way ultimately we have to understand that for our own benefit, we cannot just follow our mind. And yes, if God didn't command not to murder, would we murder? We hope not. But however, I don't only do it because it makes sense to me. I don't do it because God said so. And therefore, even when it does make sense to me, I say, well, God doesn't allow it. This is a clip. We'll skip for now because we're a little late on time, but a clip showing the teacher in California. You can look at it up later. It's called The Wave, how they got the whole class. And in Germany, you have a teacher that tried it. Kids that were thinking that Nazism is bad, within a short amount of time, they were doing the same exact thing. They had benefits. They were caring for one another. They dressed the same. They were helping each other. They felt like a team. However, anyone outside of their group was considered evil, and they would attack as a team as well. Okay, we'll skip that one too. So getting back to our text, let's read the last few texts, and then we'll wrap up the summary of the class. Okay. So, Elia, if you'd like to read in fact, and then text 17.
In fact, we see today that many mishpatim that were once taken for granted are being disregarded in modern society. What society once deemed intuitive and logical was now become outdated. Due to this human tendency, we need to keep all mitzvot simply because God said so. God is above and beyond. The following text argues this point. The truth is that it's impossible to know and understand the reason why God commanded a mitzvah. When we do explain reasons for the commandments, we sense a certain taste of the mitzvah based on our limited understanding, but not that this is why it was commanded, heaven forbid. They were given,
Yeah.
there's a tiny bit
You
left.
can read that part, yeah.
The given reason for a mitzvah is just a small taste of the true meaning behind it, to give the mitzvah some flavor.
Right. So we don't only do it because this is the way it makes sense, but rather we know that what makes sense to us is just a little bit of a taste of the true reason behind it, which is the true reason we cannot understand. And like you mentioned in the earlier paragraph, we see when it comes to abortion and when it comes to many other laws, society minds change. Things change and we say it used to be legal, now it's legal. And with many other things, if we just rely on ourselves, the human tendency is to have different opinions. However, when we have a guide, we do it because God said so. And yes, if I understand it, it's great, it's a bonus, but that's not to make it or break it. And if we see over here on the side, this last slide, if you see in Hebrew, the word ta'am can mean reason and can also mean a taste, meaning the reasons that we know are a taste of a deeper reason. There's more to it. Some commandments God chose to let us know a little bit of the reason. Some of them he chose not to let us know any of the reason. But both of them have reasons way deeper than what we can understand. Okay, let's go do the summary and then we'll go to the key points that we said. So Shibla, if you'd like to read summary.
You talk to me?
Yeah.
In truth, all mitzvahs stem from God's infinite wisdom, which is totally beyond our understanding. We have covered big idea. All mitzvah, even the ones we can't understand, should be fulfilled simply because God commanded us to do so. Because human beings are always rationalized away, even the most compelling of reasons, and all of God's decisions are beyond human comprehension. Takeaway: the next time you aren't sure whether to do a mitzvah or not, think about how lucky you are that God chose you, then do it.
Right. So it's number one, we don't just do it because of rationale, because we could always rationalize any reason. We could rationalize away, meaning we could always debate the other side. And also because ultimately God's decisions are way above our comprehension. So however much we understand, there's way deeper reasons that we don't understand. So let's start with key points. We have here two. So Elia, you'll read page number 1 and Sheila, you'll read page number 2. So Elia, if you could start. Point number 1.
Okay. God does not lack or need anything. Mitzvot are for our own good. Even though God does not need anything, God chose us in our mitzvot. God is not using us to fill a need. He chooses us out of his own free will. When God asks us to do mitzvot, he's making himself vulnerable, enhancing our relationship. On a practical level, mitzvot are for our own good. On a community level, mitzvot create a healthy, functioning society. A, they ensure results. B, they legislate on all matters of good. And C, they are from a divine and perfect source.
Okay, so if you can summarize what you read over here, the key points.
Basically, God, first of all, he brought us here because he wanted a connection, and a way to strengthen a connection is asking us to do mitzvot because he's being vulnerable and making our relationship better. And mitzvot are not only for our own good, but to strengthen our relationship, like I said. And yeah, everything's for a reason, even if we don't know what the reason is.
Very good. Okay, so we had those 2 points. And number 1, mitzvot are for our own good. It helps us become better people physically, meaning it gives us a better life. a happier life, a life that's more fair. And also, it is because God, ultimately, we're doing it for him. He chose to need us. It's not that he needs us as an elect, but he chose to have a connection with us. Very good. And now to read the final key points. Sheila, if you'd like to read point 8 till the end.
You talking to me?
Yeah, if you want to read what's on the screen right now.
I can't hear you.
If you could you read what's on the screen
On-
now? Point 8 till the end.
On a, should I read 8?
Yeah, 8 and then till the end of the page.
I can't hear you. All right. On a personal level, mitzvahs shape us to become better people. Even mitzvah that seem to be irrational are present tremendous benefits on a community or personal level. On a spiritual level, mitzvah connect us to God. Even if we do not understand how we experience the connection to God, if we taste it for ourselves. Just as body needs food and drink, the soul needs Torah and mitzvah. Every mitzvah should be fulfilled without question, like a soldier who follows orders because reasons can be negotiable. God is beyond our comprehension.
Very good. So these were the last points of the class, that besides for the benefit of the mitzvah giving us a better life as a community and on a personal level, making us a better person, it also helps us spiritually to give us a connection with God, and that all commandments should be fulfilled because God commanded so, even the ones that we do understand. Because if we just go with rationale, there could always be a counter argument, and because in truth, there is deeper reasons that we don't understand. Okay, with that, we'll conclude. Thank you all for joining. It was a pleasure, and hope to see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.